I'm here at the 6th European Bioplastics Conference in Berlin, and I'm with Andy Sweetman, Chair of the European Bioplastics Association. Andy, tell me about the 6-year journey.
Yeah, the association actually started out a number of years ago as an essentially German association to promote these emerging compostable materials. But things have changed quite a lot over the years. It's become an official European trade association, working language in English to allow all countries to attend the meetings and take very much a more active part. And also I think what the last sort of 6 or 7 years have shown is it's gone from being maybe dominated by the first 2 or 3 early moving companies into a really dynamic, fast-growing market area. We now have over 70 members and rising of this association. It's company membership rather than individual membership, so it's grown very significantly. I think probably 6 years ago it was 20 or 30. The idea of the conference came around as a way to get the industry to meet. There's lots of opportunities for us to work together to bring new technical solutions to market, new developments, new partnerships, etc. And so I think that's really what began to make it so successful. And now I think most people would say this is probably the global industry meeting place.
Having sat through the first day's sessions, I'm intrigued by the range and amount of terminology that we're playing with here. At the one end and outside this conference we've got PETR, PET, PE. When we come here we're starting to talk about PLA, PEF, PHA. And there seems to be a big debate as well between oxo-degradable and compostable. There seems to be a lot of confusion in the marketplace. Where does European Bioplastics stand in trying to define common language for its members and also trying to enable consumers and the media to understand the differences between the different activities that are going on and to perhaps demystify some of the terminology?
Well, I think in your question you've actually raised two separate and important areas. Firstly, when you mentioned the different polymers, the conventional PETs, PPs, PEs, etc., and then we have these new biodegradable, compostable, renewable polymers, PLAs, PBATs, PBSs, starches, cellulosics, etc. I think in that sense, it's important to say that just look at the normal plastics world. You have lots of different materials, and the reason for that is that you need different properties for different applications. And exactly the same translates into the bio world, if I can call it that, which is that you need different materials bringing different technical properties for different applications. So it's not a question of, if you like, a technical battle between the polymers. It's choose the right polymer for the right job. My own background is within packaging, and in packaging, historically, what we do is we laminate or coat or bring these different materials together to marry those properties. So we will see many different polymers, and probably what you've noticed at this conference as well is a lot of talk about conventional polymers but derived from renewable resources. So Braskem, for example, with their renewable polyethylenes and the announcement of renewable polypropylenes as well. So it will become even more complex and wide-ranging in the future. So in terms of the polymers, expect to see more and more come along, more volumes of each of those producers, more producers of similar materials as the whole industry sort of reaches a more mature level. Moving on to your second question, the debate between compostables, biodegradable, oxo-degradable, oxo-biodegradable, these different terms, I agree with you, it's confusing, it's extremely confusing. The association is very clear on this, that we believe in renewable raw materials. We certainly believe, for the right applications, in compostable materials. And we tend to use the word compostable as clearly as possible, because compostability is mandated under European legislation. It's clear. There is a set standard, EN 13432. There are very similar standards elsewhere in the world. In the USA, it's ASTM D6400. These are very similar standards, and they work the same way. They're measuring the true biodegradation and compostability and disintegration of these materials in a waste management process. So that's effectively, composting is just one phrase. There could be anaerobic digestion technologies which are emerging quite strongly. We're talking about organic recycling. And so we only endorse materials which are independently tested to these norms and certified as such. If you come on to other technologies, oxo-biodegradables and similar technologies revolve around taking conventional materials and putting an additive into those materials which will make them break down over time. Why are we effectively against these kind of technologies? Well, first of all, they don't improve the fundamental sustainability of the polymers. We're still talking about conventional oil-derived polymers, so we're not suddenly becoming renewable with these technologies. And the other thing is that they don't actually work in the organic recycling methods that we're looking to facilitate. So you end up questioning, well, what's the point of these technologies? They don't meet the standards that are in place. They don't break down in composting. They don't break down in anaerobic digestion technologies. They're not renewable at the beginning. So actually, where's the sustainability benefit? And so we simply say, if you can't prove the benefits, if you can't prove that you meet the standards, then we're not prepared to endorse these technologies.
A huge proportion of our audience is in the beverage industry, a lot of it in bottled water, and we've seen a varying reaction to PLA. And I think you may have partially answered the question already in your previous answer, but very simply, does PLA actually contaminate the recycling stream?
I've got to be honest and say I don't feel personally qualified to answer that question. I think that's a question to put to the producers of PLA. What I think we will certainly see is the further development of recycling streams and sorting streams. And at the end of the day, the question as to what is a contaminant and what is an asset that can be revalorised, if I can use that term, is more a question of actual quantities. So I think the approach that's taken by the PLA producers is to say, let's work on the systems so that we can get the PLA materials and other materials into PLA recycling streams, rather than having them being viewed as a contaminant to anything else. The other thing, of course, that is being talked about, and you've seen this with the likes of Coca-Cola and the plant bottle, is bioplastics, which are actually chemically identical to the polyesters being used in the industry today. So the plant bottle is a bio-derived, a renewably derived polyester, but chemically it's polyester. So you can bring those kind of technologies in, and it's exactly the same material running through the same recycling streams. So that's certainly an option that I think will develop very, very strongly. But for the intricacies of PLA and its possible effects on the PET stream, that's a question that needs to go to the PLA industry, who are much better qualified to look at that.
Okay, we'll follow that up. But one particular observation then would be when there is sufficient PLA in the market, or if there is sufficient PLA in the market, and it therefore has the volume to have value.
Yeah.
Is the infrared sorting technology that's currently used to separate PVC from PE from PET, is it able to be adjusted to work for PLA?
Yes.
Is that just a technical issue?
That's right. The sorting techniques exist. They're not in place everywhere, but relatively simple sorting techniques exist that allow you to separate these different materials. And that has to be the way that the industry will go. You go for, I think with the different percentages, you go from, let's say it's less than 1%, a tiny amount is maybe a minor irritant. From a more consequential percentage onwards, maybe 10 or 20%, then suddenly that material stream becomes really valuable in its own right. It's that little gap in the middle when you're more than an irritant, but you're not yet a whole new waste stream, where you have to manage that. And that's where the technologies are needed to help that sorting process.
Okay, so in terms of PLA, it may just be effectively something that's ahead of its time in the marketplace.
Yes, but I think as well, in the early days, people look at every market opportunity and they'll test out how things work. As we mature, I think what you see more and more is that the right materials go into the right applications. So one of the questions I'm often asked is, bioplastics, is it about renewability or is it about organic recycling, compostability? And my answer to that is, well, that depends on the application. My own company, Novia Films, we operate with NatureFlex compostable materials in the flexible packaging industry. And if you think what happens in flexible packaging, it's the last thing that's thrown in the bin, together with all the food waste. It's lightweight, It's often mixed materials. How can you recycle it? In reality, you can't. So what a great idea then, that it's sitting there in the residual waste bin in the kitchen, which is essentially food waste, peelings, etc. And then the flexibles, take the whole lot off to organic recycling together without the need for separation.
So, two final questions. One, what's going to be your major takeaway from this conference? And what's next for European Bioplastics?
From a European Bioplastics perspective, become more active than we have been for a while in terms of trying to help create the right landscape, the right political framework for success. Give bioplastics, which are still a young industry, more of an opportunity to operate and to develop in a stronger way. And the strapline of the association, which is driving the evolution of plastics, I think says it all. This is not bioplastics versus plastics. We are just literally the next step for the plastics industry. One of the things that I thought was very interesting in yesterday's sessions was talk around sustainability criteria and greenwashing, and making sure that we make the claims as clear as possible. And even in our industry, where I think we're actually very, very good, there are still examples where we're perhaps not clear enough over some of the language we use. And certainly there's work going on within some of the working groups of the association to say these are the kind of criteria that we think give more tangible measures of sustainability, and these are how we think we should communicate. So that work will go on over the next few months, and I think that will be helpful. People will be able to say, well, the word sustainable, it's not tangible. People don't know really what it means. Okay, it's about being green, but what does green mean? So can you bring these things down to much more tangible, concrete measures that actually prove the benefits? And I think a lot of people were quite taken with some discussions around that yesterday.
Thanks again for downloading this podcast. For more news, analysis, opinion, interviews and multimedia for the food and beverage industry, go to foodbev.com.